the first time we're actually playing together
at the same time.
At the same time,
right,
although we've played on the same program with
right.
orchestra before, which is kind of a weird situation for pianists to have been in. We played on one of these, you know, instead of the three tenors, the three pianists kind of things. So we've spent time with each other and hung out backstage.
Yeah, we've been to movies together, actually,
That's
but
right.
not actually played together. So, yeah, no, this is actually really good, because pianists can easily go. I mean, if you're lucky enough, I mean, fortunate enough to be a pianist who's performing with orchestra, you can easily go all year and not run into another pianist.
You know, we live in this little cocoon. We play with all these other musicians, but we don't see other pianists unless they're a student, maybe, who comes to play or something like that.
Right. Or if we're in a chamber music festival and there might be one other pianist around and we're sharing all the repertoire and still not playing together that often. So this is a total treat.
And yeah, it's really a blast. We met this morning before we met with the orchestra, and we had a chance to rehearse, and it's just really fun.
Yeah,
it's nice
easy
music
so far.
making, and you know, we generally agree. I mean, I defer to Jackie in all matters.
No, I defer to Orli in all matters, actually. Yeah. Well, good question about playing together and our personalities working together. I mean, I think we kind of knew from having met each other and just from our email correspondence in the last few weeks that we would get along fine, I mean, personally and musically. But so far, we've had a couple of different ideas, and we've both been flexible, and I've already changed a couple of things because Orli was doing them better, and I think she's changed a couple of things because she liked what I was doing. And that's a really, really good part of it.
No, I actually feel it, you know, at the end of one day working on it together, I think that, certainly for me, I'm playing it a lot better than I did at the beginning of that day. And that's what great chamber music is about. That's what great orchestral music is about anytime. You know, it's the combination. You know, it's what any good relationship is about. It's about the combination actually making each individual better than they would be on their own.
And I learned so much in a chamber music setting, playing with string players, playing with wind players. I mean, all of the musical things that they do that are not automatic and easy to do at the piano. You get it in your ear and you think, oh, I could make that sound, or I could make that work, and then you figure out how to do it at the piano, which is, you know, inherently, in some ways, not as musical an instrument. You know, I mean, it's kind of a, it's, you know, technically a percussion instrument. So, but to have two pianists working together is another kind of fantastic experience, because, you know, we both are playing the piano and trying to make all these things happen, and hearing a little technical thing or something that, you know, I thought, oh, I could try it that way, and that's very exciting.
Well, I think what's good about this partnership is actually Jackie and I lead similar musical lives. I think, you know, some pianists do really only concerto repertoire or only chamber music repertoire, only recitals, and both of us are in the lucky position where we get to do all three. We really do a blend of that, and that I knew going in that would mean that our collaboration on the Mozart would have that quality. All those different elements coming in, because it really is, it's a solo piano concerto. There's a lot of real solo moments, just one piano playing alone. It's a work of chamber music, and, you know, with the orchestra, it really has all the elements of everything in one piece, which is nice.
Actually, a great thing about this piece is Mozart pretty much had to find a way in this work that if he was going to have one of the pianists play something, whether it's a melody or an idea or whatever, or a scale passage that fits into the music, that the other pianist would basically have to have a chance to play it too. So it's a very strange way. I think it must have been very odd for him to have composed the work and had that in mind. I mean, there are plenty of two-piano works that came, you know, centuries later, where the two parts have very little to do with each other. But there's a certain formalized structure about this that in the first movement, a lot of the time...
It's not just formalized, right? I mean, do you have siblings?
Yeah, sure,
I have a brother. You know, you're going to play with your brother, you're going to play with your sister. Right. You better make it fair, or it's not going to go well.
That's right.
And I see him doing that. And he played this with his sister, and he really. I'm not sure actually which part he played. I've read a couple of different things.
It could have been either one.
But exactly, that's the point. It could have been either one, and she never would have looked bad. He never would have looked bad.
Right. And, you know, in the first movement, you'll have piano one playing a certain passage, and then you'll basically hear the same passage in piano two, maybe a slightly more complicated version,
or in a different octave,
or you know, a couple of extra notes added, something like that.
He's also very careful about balancing, right? So the first movement starts with piano one and then piano two, but the second movement, even though they start together, piano one first has the, and piano two first has the theme. First has the theme. But then piano one finishes.
Right, exactly. It does seem very much like...
Yeah, he was really thinking about that. I mean, he
diplomatically written.
You know, he was, what, 22?
Yeah,
I mean, it's very impressive understanding of sibling relationships.
For two pianos, you've always got to face I mean, I think to some extent the composer has to face this challenge, but the performers even more have to face the challenge that you simply can have, as Mozart was once told, too many notes. And too many similarly colored notes happening at once. And that can happen a lot. That happens a lot, for example, with Rachmaninoff two-piano music, which is incredible music and lush and rich and full, and there can be 5 things going on at once. But if you're not making a conscious effort to create different colors of sound as you're playing it, it just starts to sound like you're being barraged with notes, you know? And so a challenge for the composer and for us as performers / interpreters is to keep that interesting and keep it alive, and to have a sense that, you know, there's a whole mystique about any two-piano performance. You know, are the pianos perfectly matched? And that's always a big thing, you know, that a concert hall would worry about, and that the pianist might worry about, and that the conductor would worry about. You know, are the pianos matched? And I think to a certain extent, it's great if the pianos are reasonably similar in relative volume, but actually have very slightly different characters, because in a way, that gives a chance, especially in this Mozart two-piano concerto, where so much of the material is, as we've talked about, you know, you hear it in one piano and then you hear it, a different version of it in the other piano. It's nice if there's a slightly different character in that sound. And I think that's a big part of two-piano writing, is just being aware of how you can make that work. For example, you've got 2 pianos, you've got 2 sets of pedals. One pianist can be pedaling and the other pianist can be not pedaling. You get very different textural sort of richness that way. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do with 2 pianos that you can't do with one. There's a couple of great passages in the first movement where even, I mean, the right hand of one piano and the right hand of the other piano are doing a passage that's so interlocked that you, on one piano with 2 hands, could never do it. It really has to be done on 2 pianos, and it creates a special effect that you just simply couldn't do any other way.
Well, I think it's interesting, you talk about the, you know, having the 2 pianos as opposed to 2 different instruments, the sort of the drawback, right, the lack of color or whatever that you have to then create. And there's also the flip side, which I think, you know, if you're playing something like the Mendelssohn piano violin concerto or the Beethoven triple concerto, that it's much harder to balance 2 different instruments. So in a sense, for the composer, it's very easy to find an even keel between the 2 pianos, and then it's just a question of being able to create the colors.
Right.
But on some level, it's probably advantageous to write for 2 similar instruments, like the Sinfonia Concertante. Yes, the violin is not quite the viola, but they have enough similarities that there's a certain balance. But, you know, something like the Mendelssohn double, trying to get the string instrument and the piano to balance each other and then somehow fit into a context of a greater orchestral thing, or the Beethoven triple, where, you know, the violin and cello are often put against the piano in that way. That's a much more complex issue, I think.
Yeah, it is.
In certain ways, this is more simple. It's more straightforward, but it allows for great creativity. It's one of those things where the sort of the having the limits and having the boundaries is what allows him to really expand on his creativity.
And there's also something visual about 2 pianos. You know, I mean,
always.
You have these 2 9-foot monstrous instruments on stage. Everybody else is playing instruments about that big, you know. I mean, and it looks like, you know, it's a completely different story. It's just, there's something exciting about it, and
although I have to say, standing in front of 2 pianos, I really feel like that piano just starts to make my butt look big. I don't. 2 of them.
That's true. Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, yeah. Each other's hands. That's a big problem.
That is a big problem.
You know,
although we've worked out something, I think, which not all 2 piano groups work out. We actually got the wonderful stage crew here built us these little contraptions. Right, so we don't have to have music desks that are sticking out of the piano. I mean, that's always one of the difficulties with 2 pianos.
Oh.
You can see a tiny little bit of the person's forehead.
Right, right. No, I mean, Joe Cook is the ultimate stage manager, because, you know, you ask him and say, is there any way that we could somehow have the music rack a little lower? And 5 minutes later, he's built something, you know, and he comes back with his crew and says, how's this, you know? And so it's really nice. We basically have customized music racks. You know, we should get him. We should market those.
Yeah, we should patent them.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
No,
yeah.
we should market. No,
yeah, right. Yeah, the Shaham Parker music racks. Yeah, they're working really well.